The glittering red bow on a brand new BMW shined under the Christmas lights like a cruel joke. My son, the boy I raised with every sacrifice, handed the keys to his mother-in-law, a woman who had only been in our family for 8 months. His smile glowed with pride while I stood in the shadows holding my own gift, a plastic piggy bank rattling with just $3 pathetic. 35 years of motherhood reduced to pocket change. That was the night I realized I had been pushed out of my own family and replaced by someone who wore designer clothes and a false smile. But the truth? That car was not just a gift. It was the opening move in a dangerous game of deception, betrayal, and fraud that would nearly destroy us all. Stay with me and subscribe to Silent Lies, because what comes next will leave you breathless. The red bow was the first thing I saw, the kind of glossy ribbon that belongs in a catalog, not a driveway, not on a winter night that remembers where your bones ache. It sat on the hood of a brand new BMW like a crown, catching the reflection of our Christmas lights and throwing it back at me in sharp, glittering shards. My son stood beside it, tall and eager, lifting the keys like a trophy. He said, "Merry Christmas, Mom Linda," in the tone you use when a surprise is about to land on exactly the right person. I was not that person. From the kitchen window, I could see him beaming the way he used to beam when he was 8, and found the biggest present under the tree. His wife clapped, that quick little rhythm that says she has won, and the woman who had drifted into our family on a tide of polished hair and expensive perfume pressed her hand to her chest as if the air had been taken away by gratitude. Neighbors turned their heads. You could not help it. The car purred even when it stood still, as if it were a sleek animal half ready to leap. In my hands I held a pink plastic piggy bank. It was the kind of thing you give a child to teach them patience, to teach them that small coins become larger dreams if you wait long enough. I shook it and heard 3 paper bills whisper together. 3. After 35 years of knowing every way my son laughed and every way he sulked. After school lunches made from nothing. After a college tuition that should have been impossible. After the wedding where I pressed an envelope into his palm and told him not to open it until morning. After all of that, $3. It is funny how quickly a room becomes a stage set. My kitchen, warm and smelling of cinnamon and ham and baked yeast, turned into the place where the mother smiles. That is all that is required of her. She smiles. She does not flinch when the little bank is placed in her hands. She nods at the joke. She tells herself the gift is thoughtful because it was called thoughtful, and she is too old to start saying what she really thinks on a holiday. The pig sat beside a stack of Christmas cards I would not send. They had been waiting for stamps I had forgotten to buy, but the truth was uglier. Those cheerful pictures could not cross the thin cold that had entered my house long before December. I had spent 6 hours on dinner. Honey-glazed ham, an old family recipe with a stubborn streak that burns if you rush it. Rolls that needed exactly the right water and exactly the right kneading, the way my husband had insisted when he was alive. Green beans from scratch because my daughter-in-law claimed the canned kind tasted like school cafeterias. The trifle she loved and no one else did. My back had its own song by then. My hands looked older than I remembered. I wish I could tell you that I marched out onto the porch and said something magnificent. I wish I could tell you I laughed and returned the pig, the way you fling a bad joke back at the joke teller. Instead, I watched through glass as my son opened the passenger door for the woman with the silver hair and the designer coat. It was a gentleman's gesture, drilled into him by a father who taught him to hold doors and never to speak with food in his mouth. Linda glowed under the lights like a softly polished coin. Her fingers skimmed the leather and chrome, and she laughed a high, tinkling laugh that made me think of ornaments shivering against tree branches. They came back briefly for their coats and their leftovers. They did not ask me to come along for the maiden voyage. That word stayed in my mouth, bitter and metallic. Maiden voyage, as if a ship were setting out and the mother had been left on the dock, waving a handkerchief that no one looked at. Ashley called through the hall, her voice bright and thoughtless. They were going to take Mom Linda for a spin and show her around town. Not a question. Not even a pause for the answer I might have given. My son called out that dinner had been wonderful and that he would see me next week, and I felt my jaw find a new hardness. The front door closed. There was the rapid, satisfying click of new car doors. Then the engine, that contented hum of money at work. The driveway emptied. Their tail lights stitched a red line down the street and vanished into the neighborhood, where icicle lights hung off gutters and families sat too close together, arguing about batteries and the rules of board games. I stood alone with my clean counters and my mountain of dishes and the pig. The house fell quiet in a way that only houses with history can. the kind of quiet that lets old sounds rise to the surface. The dishwasher breathed. The grandfather clock that my husband had wound each Sunday ticked like a slow, patient heart. The radiator sighed. I looked at the small dent in the paint on the doorframe where my son had measured his height each birthday. I looked at the place on the floor where Tom's chair had scuffed the varnish, a crescent little moon that would never come out. There is a peculiar cruelty to symbolic gifts. They dangle their meaning in front of you as if you ought to be grateful for understanding it. You save money, he said. You have always been thrifty. Therefore, a bank. He could have placed a ribbon on a habit and handed it back to me. The 3 bills were the punchline. They said, "We see you, but only as the one who keeps the coupons and counts the change. We see you, but not as the woman who kept a family stitched together with stubbornness and the reliable magic of meals that appear from a pantry that looks empty." I carried the pig to the mantel and set it next to a photograph of our last Christmas with Tom. He had his hand on my shoulder in that picture, and even though photographs do not speak, I could hear him say the one thing he always did when I swallowed pain for the sake of peace. "Dorothy, do not be small in your own house." He had hated false kindness. He had hated the way people said things with their eyes and something else with their mouths. He would have told me to sit down, to eat my own dinner while it was hot, to pour a glass of wine that made sense of the whole day. I picked up my plate instead. I stood at the counter and ate ham with my fingers, the way we had when the power went out one January, and we lived by candlelight for 3 nights. The rolls were soft and proud of themselves. The trifle was as sweet as I remembered and as unnecessary. I could see the smear of lipstick Ashley had left on her glass. I could see the single strand of silver hair that had fallen from Linda's perfect head and landed on my tablecloth like an exclamation point. I left it there. When you raise a child, you think you will be able to read them forever. You think there is a secret language that belongs to the 2 of you, an alphabet of old stories and inside jokes, and that when the world tries to push between you, it will fail. But time edits even the most loyal dictionary. He had learned new words. He had learned the shine that money makes on a person who knows how to stand in the right place at the right time. He had learned to call another woman Mom with a gentle, careful inflection that did not sound like a mistake. I loved him anyway. Love is not a tame thing. It swells and recedes and shows you what you are capable of. That night it did not soften anything. It simply refused to collapse. I washed the serving dishes one by one, paying attention to the weight of each, the way my mother had taught me to do so, that you do not drop a platter when the soap makes it treacherous. Steam fogged the window. Outside, the street looked like a snow globe someone had shaken and set down on a shelf. Lights twinkled. A dog barked and was told to come inside. Somewhere very far away, a siren passed and did not stop. When the last dish leaned in the rack and the last towel lay damp on the oven handle, I turned back toward the counter. That was when I saw it. A black bag, glossy and precise, resting beside the little pink pig like a queen beside a pauper. I did not reach for it. Not then. I only stood still and watched it as if it might move on its own. I could smell perfume, sharp and citrus at the top, warm and expensive underneath. The kind of smell that is supposed to say power without saying anything at all. I told myself I would put it by the door for when they returned. I told myself I would not touch it, that I would not turn into the kind of woman who pries. I turned off the lights and left the kitchen dark except for the hum of the dishwasher and the small red eye of the coffee maker. Upstairs, the bedroom waited, familiar and kind. I paused at the foot of the stairs and looked back at the window, at the yard where tire tracks had already begun to fill with frost. Somewhere in the neighborhood, laughter rose and fell. I picked up the pig and held its ridiculous round belly against my palm. $3 rustled inside like dry leaves, a car gift that roared, a bank that whispered. I set the pig down again, turned, and climbed the stairs, feeling the old banister under my hand, the varnish worn smooth by years of going up and coming down. There would be time tomorrow for whatever tomorrow wanted. Tonight I let the house close around me like a coat that still fit, and I listened to the clock speak its patient seconds into the dark. The black leather purse looked out of place on my counter, a queen beside a toy pig. It sat there with quiet arrogance, smooth and heavy, smelling faintly of expensive perfume, the kind of accessory that whispered status without saying a word. Linda's purse. Forgotten, or at least that was what I wanted to believe at first. But as the hum of the dishwasher filled the silence, I felt my gaze pulled toward it like it had gravity. I told myself to leave it alone, to simply place it by the door and hand it over when they returned from their triumphant parade around town. That would have been the polite thing, the good mother thing. but politeness has limits. And mine had just been tested by $3 miserable rattling inside a plastic pig. Curiosity is a dangerous animal, but it is also the only one that kept me company that night. I picked up the purse, surprised at its weight. Heavier than I expected. My fingers brushed across the zipper. Cool metal against skin that still burned from scrubbing pans, just to check. I muttered to no one but the empty kitchen, just to make sure nothing falls out. A mother's excuse, but it worked well enough. Inside was a world Linda carried with her. A rhinestone phone case that glittered like it belonged to someone much younger. A prescription bottle rattling with pills. A wallet that bulged with cards and bills. I set it all out on my dresser upstairs, one item at a time, like laying clues on the table of a detective novel. The careful act of someone who knows she is stepping over a line but cannot stop herself. The wallet alone was enough to make me sit down. Nearly $400 in cash, stacked with the kind of ease that suggested this was pocket change, not a hard-earned reserve. Credit cards for every major bank, plus the luxury store cards Nordstrom, Saks, Tiffany. Then the papers, folded neat as secrets behind her driver's license. Bank statements. Recent. 3 of them. I unfolded them with hands that shook before I even read the numbers. And then my eyebrows climbed so high I thought they might never come back down. Linda wasn't just comfortable. She wasn't just well off. She was swimming in zeros, balances so high that a 60 BMW was no more significant than a trinket. I sat back hard in Tom's old recliner, the same chair my son once tried to convince me to throw away because it didn't match his wife's decorating vision. Funny. Nothing about me ever matched their vision anymore. But Linda matched perfectly. With her polished silver hair and her gracious laugh, she had stepped into my family's empty space and filled it like she'd always belonged there. And now, looking at these statements, I understood. She didn't just want belonging. She wanted control. Her phone buzzed then, lighting up the dresser. I glanced at the screen. Deposit confirmed. 15-0 from Sunset Investments. Another buzz. Meeting confirmed for Thursday. Bring the Williams file. My heart skipped a beat. Williams. That was us. I picked up the phone, hands trembling. Notifications scrolled across like frantic whispers. Call me back. Where are you? 23 missed calls from someone named Brian Chen. Texts that grew more desperate, almost panicked. The police are looking for you. Police? The house phone rang, slicing through the air like a knife. I jumped, fumbling the receiver to my ear. A calm male voice introduced himself as Officer Patterson with the state police. I'm calling about a report we received regarding a missing person. A Linda Chen. Records show she was last seen at your address earlier today. Chen. The name struck me like cold water. She had never once mentioned it. Always Linda, always widow, always alone. No family, no children. Yet here was a son so frantic he had called the police within hours of her absence. I steadied my voice and lied without hesitation. I'm sorry, officer, but I'm not familiar with that name. But the officer insisted. Her son had filed the report. He said she'd been at my house for Christmas dinner. My mind worked furiously. We did have dinner today, I admitted cautiously, but I believe she left with my son and daughter-in-law. They were taking her for a drive in her new car. The words felt sharp in my mouth. New car. A BMW my son could not possibly afford. After I hung up, I turned back to the glowing phone on my dresser. Linda's secret life was unraveling right in front of me. Photos filled the gallery, and at first, they were innocent enough family dinners, barbecues, birthdays, but she was in all of them, always in the center, as if she were the nucleus of our gatherings. My stomach twisted. Then came the older photos. Screenshots of bank statements, not hers but mine. Photos of my living room, my bedroom, even my jewelry box, Tom's death certificate, our marriage license, property records. And then the worst of them all, my social security card, which I kept hidden upstairs. She had been in my home, snooping through drawers, documenting everything like a predator cataloging its prey. I sat frozen, the phone heavy in my hands. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't loneliness. This was surveillance, deliberate, meticulous, predatory. The grandfather clock chimed 7, reminding me that hours had passed since they'd left for their joyride. A simple tour of the neighborhood shouldn't take so long. My mind raced. Were they with her still? Was she manipulating them even now? I gathered everything back into her purse, carefully placing each item as I'd found it. But before zipping it shut, I pulled out my own phone and snapped photos of the bank statements, the documents, the messages. If Linda was playing a game, I had just learned the rules. The sound of the BMW's engine rolled back into the driveway, smooth and confident, the way predators return to a familiar hunting ground. I moved to the kitchen, purse in hand, and positioned myself by the window. When I saw her walking toward my door, I understood something I had missed before. The way she scanned the yard, the precision in her steps, the calculating glint in her eyes. This was no woman who had forgotten her purse. This was a woman who had planted it, bait on a hook, waiting to see who might bite. She knocked, her smile warm, her laugh practiced. "Oh, Dorothy, thank you so much for keeping my purse safe. I can't believe I forgot it." But I knew better now. Nothing about Linda Chen was accidental. When the state police called, I thought my heart might pound straight out of my chest. Missing person. Linda Chen. The name itself was a betrayal, a mask torn away from the smiling widow who had slipped into our lives. She had told us she was alone, a grieving woman with no family. But now there was a son, Brian Chen, desperate, frantic, flooding her phone with calls, even involving the police. I lied, of course. I told the officer she had left with Marcus and Ashley in her new car. What else could I say? That she had been parading around my home, snapping pictures of my documents, hiding behind a performance of sweetness. The police would not believe me. Not yet. But I believed my own eyes. The evidence sat in my hands. Bank statements thick with money, photographs of my most private spaces, and text notifications that painted her not as a helpless widow, but as a calculating infiltrator. When they returned that night, the car humming like it had swallowed a fortune, I stood ready. Purse in hand, smile fixed on my lips, the perfect hostess. Linda swept through the door with her practiced laugh, gushing gratitude, fingers darting through her wallet to confirm nothing was missing. She called Marcus her thoughtful boy again, twisting the word boy like a knife, while I stood there pretending to be fooled. But in her eyes I caught something new. Suspicion. She wondered if I had looked. She wondered how much I knew. The next morning I decided I needed answers. Real ones. I searched for Brian Chen on my computer, and within 15 minutes his life unfolded on the screen. A successful attorney in Seattle, specializing in elder law, estate planning, and the cruelest irony elder fraud cases. His Facebook page was full of smiling photographs with his mother, showing a bond so close, so loving, that her act of loneliness seemed almost grotesque. Family dinners, vacations, celebrations. She was not abandoned. She was adored. So why had she lied? Why had she inserted herself into my family, a widow among widows, as if she were starved for belonging? The answer sat heavy in my chest, because she wanted something. And now I knew it wasn't just affection, it was assets. As I dug deeper, I found more threads. Brian's name connected to articles about high-profile elder fraud cases, schemes where vulnerable seniors had been tricked into signing over property or liquidating savings. Each story echoed with details that sounded hauntingly familiar: manipulation disguised as kindness, financial advice leading to ruin, trust betrayed for profit. I leaned back in Tom's old chair and let the horror wash over me. Linda wasn't just a manipulator. She was a predator, running a sophisticated con. And my son had bought her a '60 car as an offering. That night, the phone rang again. Marcus's voice was tense, formal. He and Ashley were coming over. They arrived dressed like lawyers, faces grim, eyes rehearsed. They sat across my table as if I were the one on trial. "Mom," Marcus began carefully. "Linda feels violated. She thinks you went through her purse." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Of course I did," I answered sweetly. "What if something had fallen out? What if she had medication that needed refrigeration? I was being responsible." Ashley leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Linda also feels uncomfortable about the questions you asked, about her son, about her finances." I folded my hands on the table. I was making conversation. I thought it was wonderful that she has family who cares about her. They exchanged glances, rehearsed lines stumbling. Marcus pressed on. "Her relationship with her son is complicated." Complicated. That was not what I had seen in Brian's desperate texts or his secretary's description of their daily calls. That was not what the smiling family photos showed. "And the police?" I asked softly. "Was that complicated too?" More silence. Ashley stepped in quickly, spinning another lie. "Her son has control issues. He gets anxious when he doesn't know where she is. That's part of why she needed to get away. Control issues. My laughter nearly broke free. They were rewriting the story in real time, turning a devoted son into a villain to protect the fraudster who had ensnared them. Linda is family now, Marcus declared finally, his voice rising with false conviction. She's been like a mother to us, especially since Dad died. She's been there in ways— His words trailed off, but the damage was done. In ways I haven't been. I finished for him. My tone sharp as glass. That's what you meant, isn't it? She's the kind of mother who deserves a BMW, unlike the one who deserves $3 in a piggy bank. The silence was ice. Ashley's hand twitched to her wedding ring, her tell when she lied. How exactly did you afford that car? I asked suddenly, turning the conversation like a blade. Marcus froze. We saved. For how long? He bristled. Our finances are none of your business. You're right, I said calmly. Your finances aren't my business, just like Linda's purse wasn't hers. But I am curious. This promotion you bragged about, when did it happen? He shifted uncomfortably. A few months ago, regional sales manager. That's odd, I replied, tilting my head, because I ran into your old boss. He said the company was cutting jobs, not creating them. Marcus went pale. Ashley's hand gripped her ring so tightly her knuckles whitened. I stood then, walking to the window, staring out at the street that had once felt safe. You've been lying, Marcus. About your job, about your money, about everything. And Linda has been feeding you those lies, hasn't she? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was confession enough. When they left, I sat alone in the ticking quiet of my house, the piggy bank gleaming mockingly from the mantel. I thought of Linda's prescription bottle, of her carefully folded bank statements, of her camera roll filled with pictures of my life. She wasn't just after Marcus. She was after me. That night, I poured coffee and made a vow. If Linda Chen wanted to play a game of deception, then I would learn every rule. She thought I was a helpless old woman, too naive to notice. But she was wrong. I had seen enough in hospitals and marriages and funerals to know that survival isn't about strength, it's about strategy. The next morning I called my lawyer. It was time to prepare for war. The kitchen table had become a battlefield. Marcus and Ashley sat across from me like prosecutors, their shoulders squared, their eyes avoiding mine. They thought they were in control, that they had rehearsed every line, every excuse Linda had fed them. But I knew better. I had already glimpsed the machinery beneath Linda's polished smile, and I understood exactly how dangerous it was. Marcus's voice trembled with the weight of a lie. Mom, you have to understand. Linda has been like family to us. She's helped us through so much. I leaned back, folding my hands together, letting the silence stretch until he shifted in his chair. Like family? You mean she's been like a mother? The kind who gets a BMW while your real mother gets $3 in a pink piggy bank? The air went sharp. Ashley's eyes flickered to Marcus, silently begging him not to answer. He swallowed hard, but the truth had already been spoken. I had raised him to know honesty, to value sacrifice. But Linda had woven a new story for him, one that painted me as the stingy relic of the past while she shone as the glamorous savior of his future. He didn't even realize he was drowning. I went to the counter, picked up the piggy bank, and shook it gently so the 3 bills rustled inside. This was your idea of symbolic, wasn't it? I asked softly. That I'm the woman who pinches pennies, the one who should be grateful for scraps. Marcus flinched, but Ashley jumped in quickly. You're twisting it. It wasn't meant to hurt you. Then what was it meant to do? I asked, my voice sharp. Because I know what a $60,000 car does. It buys loyalty, it buys silence, and it buys control. Tell me, Marcus, did you afford it? His jaw tightened. We saved. I walked back to the table and leaned down until I was eye level with him. Don't insult me. A car like that requires more than savings. Did you take out a loan? Ashley's hand went to her wedding ring, twisting it the way she always did when she lied. I saw it, and my stomach turned. Finally, Marcus spoke. We refinanced the house. There it was. The truth, ugly and bare. They had mortgaged their future for a woman they had known less than a year. I straightened, my pulse pounding in my ears. You risked everything for her? For Linda? Ashley's voice broke. She promised us opportunities, connections. She said if we showed her we trusted her, she could change everything. I laughed bitterly. Change everything? She's already changed everything. She's divided this family. She's made you suspicious of me, of your own mother. And she's stealing more than money, Marcus. She's stealing your judgment, your loyalty, your very sense of who you are. Marcus dropped his gaze ashamed, but I pressed on. And what about the appraisal? The one done on my house without my knowledge? Do you think I wouldn't find out? His head jerked up. What appraisal? October 15th, I snapped. $450,000, ordered by you, authorized by a power of attorney document with my forged signature. The blood drained from his face. I didn't do that. I never saw those papers. Then who did? I demanded. Because someone filed them with the county clerk. And I can promise you it wasn't me. The room spun with silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock sounded like a hammer striking nails into a coffin. Ashley's lips parted, but no sound came. Marcus's face was pale and sickly, and I realized then they were victims too. Not innocent, not blameless, but ensnared in Linda's web just as I was meant to be. Linda told us it was just a formality, Ashley whispered finally. She said it would help secure the investment group's approval. We never saw the paperwork. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound ricocheting through the kitchen. That's because she didn't want you to see it. She wanted control. Over me, over my home, over everything your father and I built from nothing. Marcus pushed back from the table, running a hand through his hair. He looked older in that moment, weighed down by debt, by guilt, by shame. Mom, we didn't know. We thought God. We thought she was helping us. I softened then, just enough to let him see I wasn't his enemy. Marcus, she isn't helping, she's conning. She's been studying us, collecting documents, photographing my private papers. She knew you were struggling before you even realized it, and she used it. She used you. Ashley's eyes filled with tears. We're in too deep. The car, the mortgage, the bills. We can't back out now. I sat back, my decision already made. Then we don't back out. We fight. On her terms, with her rules. She thinks I'm weak, a helpless old woman she can trick. But she doesn't know me. She doesn't know what I'm capable of when my family is on the line. Marcus looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing me for the first time in years. There was fear in his eyes, but also something else. Hope. That night, long after they had gone, I sat at my kitchen table with every scrap of evidence I had collected. Bank statements, screenshots, notes from phone calls. I spread them out like puzzle pieces and forced myself to see the whole picture. Linda's game was bigger than I had imagined. The BMW was bait, the mortgage was leverage, and the forged power of attorney was the trap. Piece by piece, she was positioning herself to strip me of everything: my house, my savings, Tom's pension. She had Marcus and Ashley tangled in debt, desperate enough to obey. And once I signed the wrong paper, she would own me completely. But I was not about to let her win. I poured a fresh cup of coffee, the bitter steam rising like battle smoke. Tom, I whispered into the quiet, you'd be proud. I pulled a notebook toward me and began to write every detail, every suspicion, every plan. By the time dawn crept across the window, I had outlined my counterattack. Linda Chen thought she had chosen her victim. She thought she had measured me, weighed me, and found me lacking. But she had underestimated the woman who had survived grief, who had raised a son alone after losing her husband, who had built a life out of sacrifice and stubbornness. The rules of the game had just changed. The day after I uncovered the forged documents, the world looked different. Every sound carried an edge: the creak of the stairs, the whisper of wind against the window pane, even the steady tick of the grandfather clock. It was as if the house itself knew we were at war. Linda Chen was no longer just a manipulative guest. She was an enemy inside the gates. I knew I couldn't confront her directly. Not yet. She thrived on performance, on twisting words until truth turned inside out. If I accused her now, she would laugh it off, charm Marcus, and paint me as paranoid. No, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Ironclad, undeniable, impossible to dismiss proof. So I devised a plan. When Marcus and Ashley returned that evening, I asked them to sit. Their faces were still heavy with guilt, their eyes weary from carrying the weight of lies. I set a pot of coffee on the table, poured 3 cups, and slid one across to each of them. If you want to make this right, I said, you're going to have to help me. Marcus frowned. Help you do what? Bait the trap, I replied simply. Ashley's hands trembled as she wrapped them around her cup. If Linda finds out. She won't, I cut in sharply, because she underestimates me. That's her weakness. She thinks I'm old, naive, blind. She's wrong. I pulled out a stack of papers from my folder. Fake bank statements, meticulously crafted. Inflated balances, fictional investments, assets I didn't have but could convincingly claim. She thinks I'm worth $500,000, I explained. These will make her believe I'm worth $2 million. Marcus's eyes widened. Why would you do that? Because greed blinds even the cleverest predator. When she sees these numbers, she won't be cautious. She'll rush. And when she rushes, she'll make mistakes. Ashley whispered. You sound like you've done this before. I met her gaze. No. But I've survived worse than Linda Chen. We rehearsed the script that night. Marcus would call her, say I had changed my mind, that I trusted her judgment. Ashley would arrange a meeting with her so-called investment group, knowing full well it didn't exist. I would play the part of a hesitant but willing widow, ready to be convinced. And all the while, I would be recording. The following afternoon, I dressed with care. Tom's wedding ring on my finger, a sweater he had once admired, a touch of lipstick to soften the edges. I needed to look vulnerable but not foolish, cautious but persuadable. Linda had to believe I was the perfect mark. The cafe downtown was nearly empty, just as she had planned. She sat in the corner, back to the wall, eyes on the door like a general surveying the battlefield. She stood when she saw me, all warmth and affection. Dorothy, darling, you look wonderful. I let her hug me, let her perfume cling to my clothes like smoke. We ordered coffee, made small talk, and then she leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Marcus tells me you're open to new possibilities. That makes me so happy. I knew you'd see reason. I smiled faintly. I just want to understand. My husband always said never to sign something I didn't understand. Her eyes softened, practiced sympathy dripping from every word. Of course, sweetie. That's why I'm here. To make sure you're taken care of. You've worked hard all your life. You deserve to enjoy it. Then she laid out the scheme. Sell the house to her associates, lease it back at a reasonable rate, and invest the proceeds in a portfolio she claimed would yield astronomical returns. I nodded, as if I were impressed, though inside my stomach churned. She was proposing I hand over my home, the place Tom and I had built together, the place where Marcus had taken his first steps, and rent it from her. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're like the mother I never had. I want to help you make the smartest decisions. I kept my voice calm, innocent. And Marcus would help manage the money? Of course, she said brightly. He's so excited. It would bring you closer. Closer. She had already driven a wedge between us, and now she dangled the illusion of reconciliation like bait. I tilted my head, playing the role. It sounds complicated. It is, she admitted. But that's why you need experts you can trust. People like me. Trust. The word tasted like poison. When we parted, she hugged me again, whispering in my ear. Don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't last. I smiled sweetly. I'll keep that in mind. Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. She thought she had me. She thought her performance had convinced me. But all she had done was hand me exactly what I needed, a recorded confession of a fraudulent scheme. That evening, Marcus showed up at my door with a folder of investment papers Linda had given him. He spread them out on my table, page after page of legal gibberish designed to intimidate and confuse. Reverse mortgages, portfolio transfers, property liquidation agreements. My God, Marcus, I murmured, flipping through. She's thorough. He looked ashamed. She said it was the only way. That if we showed her good faith, she could fix everything. I studied his face, the same face I had kissed goodnight 1,000 times, the same face that once beamed at me from behind a bicycle helmet. He was still my son. Still the boy who believed too easily. Marcus, I said softly, she's not fixing anything. She's destroying us. He broke then, shoulders slumping, eyes wet. We're drowning, Mom. Ashley lost her job. We're behind on the mortgage. The kids, they don't understand why we can't afford things anymore. I didn't know what else to do. I reached across and took his hand. You should have come to me, not her. He shook his head. She promised she could save us. She promised. His voice cracked. I squeezed his hand. She lied. We sat in silence for a long time. The only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. Then I stood, gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. We're going to turn the tables, Marcus. She thinks she's the hunter, but she has no idea who she's dealing with. That night I laid out my strategy in full. We would bait her with promises of millions. We would let her dig herself deeper with each lie, each forged document, each scheme. and then we would pull the ground out from under her. As I went to bed, I felt a clarity I hadn't known in years. The grief that had dulled me since Tom's death was gone, replaced by fire. Linda Chen thought she had chosen her victim, but she had chosen wrong. The next move was mine. Friday opened as clear and cold as cut glass, the kind of day that shows every edge. I dressed as if for church and war at once. I tucked my phone in my purse with the recording app primed, slipped Tom's ring onto my finger, and practiced the expression of a woman who is ready to be persuaded. When Marcus and Ashley pulled into my driveway, they looked like people walking into a storm that had learned their names. We did not speak in the car. The road itself seemed to hold its breath. Linda's house wore its wealth without shame. The hedges were trimmed like sentences that end in certainty. She flung open the door in silk and sparkle, her face bright with the confidence of a closing act nearly complete. She ushered us into a living room staged as a conference room, papers displayed, graphs waiting, pens aligned like tiny lances. She made a show of gratitude, of warmth, of the magic of belonging. I made a show of being flattered. I asked to meet her investment team. She did not blink so much as flicker. They had been called away on an emergency, she said. Another client in crisis. She had credentials, summaries, prospectuses. She could answer any question I had. She said this with the ease of someone who has been answering questions her entire life without ever telling the truth. Ashley leaned forward and played her part with care. I posed old woman questions about risk and safeguard, and how, exactly, one remains safe while giving everything away. Linda spread charts across the coffee table, a choreography of arrows and percentages and words that sound important because they refuse to be simple. She spoke about diversified baskets, yield over time, hedging strategies, and a modest first step of $750,000. I put a hand to my chest as if surprised by my own good fortune and drew out the documents I had crafted by lamplight. The room pivoted when I laid them down. Balances that gleamed in the millions. An inheritance that did not exist. Holdings that were air and ink and nothing else. I watched Linda read the numbers and turn them into hunger. It was visible, a quick expansion behind the eyes, a calculation accelerating like a car pressing down on a stretch of empty highway. With assets like this, she said, we could be more ambitious. There were international vehicles that could minimize exposure and protect my privacy. Offshore, I echoed, letting the words stumble like a child taking a first step. Entirely legal, she assured me, in the right hands. She patted mine as if they were the wrong ones. Marcus sat rigid, his jaw tight, the boy inside him banging on the walls of a man who had made terrible choices. Ashley watched Linda with something close to awe and something closer to fear. I studied the woman in front of me and saw the real architecture of her plan. Push me to sell the house to her associates, convert my life into liquid, move it out of sight, and then leave me as a renter in the home I had built with my husband's hands. I asked how she came by such expertise. She recited a vague history of previous teams and rarefied clients. I asked about her son. She looked at me the way you look at the door when someone knocks at the wrong hour. He does not work in this field, she said. I told her I had heard of a Brian Chen who prosecutes financial crimes against the elderly. Linda's smile collapsed like an umbrella in a wind that means business. I ended the recording on my phone with a soft tap I did not try to hide. The room sharpened. I spoke plainly. We had enough to make a case. The forged power of attorney that had appeared at the county office like a shadow with my name. The appraisal ordered without me. The documents designed to strip a widow of her home. The photos on her phone, proof that she collected secrets like currency. The offer moments ago to move funds offshore. It sat there between us, the truth and its teeth. Linda stood, then sat, then reached for a pen she did not need. It is amazing how quiet a beautiful room can become when the performance ends. Marcus found his voice first. He said he trusted her. He said she had used that trust to try to break his family. Ashley's laugh had no laughter in it. She named the car. She named the mortgage. She named the way those things had placed a chain around their necks and then asked them to admire the polish. Linda tried to bargain with air. She would make it right. She would find the money. She would talk to people she knew. She would explain. All of it was smoke without fire. I walked to the window and looked out at a neighborhood that had no idea a war had just ended inside one of its safest houses. I told her what I wanted. Call your son. Tell him what you have been doing. Return every dollar my son tied to your lie. Provide names and dates and methods to the district attorney. Do these things and perhaps a prosecutor will use kinder words. Refuse, and you will learn how hard the law can hold. For a moment I saw into the engine room of Linda's long career. She had survived this far by staying ahead of consequence. Now it stood in front of her wearing my face. She sat very still. The silk blouse, the expensive jewelry, all of it suddenly a costume she did not believe in. She said I had misread her. I said I had read her exactly. Time has a way of moving the pieces after the final move has been played. 6 months later, I sat on my porch with a glass of lemonade that returned childhood to the tongue. The air was warm and patient. The paper on my lap carried a headline about sentencing. Linda Chen had pleaded guilty to elder fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft, and the laundering of money that did not belong to her. 3 years. Sometimes justice is not grand, only sufficient. Her son had testified. That was the part that broke something in me and then bound it again. A son naming his mother's harm without naming her unlovable. He walked a narrow bridge and did not fall. Marcus and Ashley came by on Sundays now. They brought the children and their tired apologies and the small bright offerings of ordinary life. Emma ran to me with drawings that exploded with color. Jake tried to look unimpressed and then asked hungry questions. We ate simple food and told the truth badly at first and then better. There was a photograph in a frame on my mantel that Marcus had found buried in a box in Tom's old workshop. It showed us on our wedding day. So young we looked like people auditioning to be the kind of people we became. Sometimes I touched the glass. Sometimes I let it be. Marcus spoke to me the way people do when they have learned what their words can cost. He said the second mortgage was paid. He said the car was gone and the bank had been made whole. He said he had earned a promotion the difficult way, by choosing work over wishes. Ashley had 2 jobs for a time. They lived lean. They spoke healthier to each other. The children listened because children always do. After they left one evening, I sat with a letter he had written by hand in the slow ink of someone who means it. He had thanked me for raising him on less than we had, and making it feel like more. He had promised to grow up all the way. I believed him, not as a mother who needs to, but as a woman who can finally separate hope from evidence and sees both in front of her. Brian Chen and I exchanged the occasional message. We were 2 people on either side of a hard story whose edges had cut us both. He asked about my family. I asked about his days. In one of his notes he wrote that he was trying to learn how to hold 2 truths at once, that his mother had harmed people and that she had once held him with a tenderness that had taught him what love felt like. I told him that holding 2 truths was how you move through a world that refuses to be simple. The little pink pig sits on my mantel now, not as an insult but as a reminder. It rattles with 3 bills that will always be 3 bills. Nearby is a photograph from the day Linda was led away in bracelets that did not sparkle. I keep it not to gloat, but to remember how close I came to signing away my home, my history, and the part of myself that refuses to be small in her own house. Sometimes a car slows in front of my yard, and my heart bangs hard for a moment. Then it is only a neighbor, and the fear releases like a hand unclenching. The house breathes. The clock keeps honest time. I look at the doorframe with the pencil marks that climbed with my son's height, at the crescent scar on the floor where Tom's chair used to rock, at the table that has held more meals than any book could count. There is a way to measure wealth that does not require a bank. What remains is not triumph, it is steadiness. It is the clean relief of boundary, the relief of knowing that love is not a currency to be leveraged, not a dowry to be traded for the right kind of attention. I learned again what I had always known and briefly forgot. You can lose money and even regain it, but if you lose yourself, you may not find your way back. I did not lose myself. I refused to, and when the porch shadows lengthen and the first star insists on being seen, I say his name softly into the air that remembers him. Tom would have told me to eat while the food was hot. He would have said, "Dorothy, do not be small in your own house." I am not. I am exactly my size. There are stories that begin with glittering bows and end with prison walls, but the truth is always more complicated than the headlines. This one started with a red ribbon on a BMW, a gesture meant to humiliate one mother while glorifying another. It began with betrayal, disguised as generosity, with $3 rattling in a plastic piggy bank, and with the silence of a woman who had given everything only to be told she was worth nothing. But that silence did not last. It sharpened into suspicion, then into discovery, and finally into a battle where deception met its match. Linda Chen thought she was running a con, orchestrating a performance where everyone else played the fool. She had money, charm, and a carefully rehearsed script. What she didn't have was the resilience of a mother who had survived grief, hardship, and a lifetime of people underestimating her. I learned that love can blind us, but it can also give us clarity. I learned that trust can be manipulated, but it can also be rebuilt. Most of all, I learned that justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers, steady and relentless, until the truth can no longer be denied. Linda was exposed. My son found the courage to face his mistakes, and my family was forced to confront its fractures and begin again. Painful as it was real, and real is what saves us. So when I look at the little pink pig now, it no longer mocks me. It reminds me of the danger of ignoring the signs, of the cost of silence, of the strength it takes to fight when the world expects you to give up. It sits beside a wedding photo of two young dreamers and a picture of a con artist led away in handcuffs. Between those images lies the whole story: love, betrayal, survival, and the choice to keep standing. This is not just my story. It's a warning to every family, every mother, every child who thinks they are immune to manipulation. It's proof that betrayal often comes dressed as kindness, that predators can hide in plain sight, and that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who open the door to danger. But it's also a testament to strength, to the refusal to be small in your own house, to the power of saying no, even when it means standing alone, to the truth that no scam, no fraud, no betrayal can define who you are unless you let it. If you've made it this far, then you know. These aren't just stories. They are lessons carved in pain and sharpened by survival. And there are more to tell. So stay with me. Let me show you the lies people live behind, the secrets they bury, and the truths they hope never see the light of day. Subscribe to Silent Lies because the next story may be closer to your own life than you think.